is on. All right, so the ad-libbing can now stop and we'll actually follow this. So the introduction to Trust Public Land, our work here in Colorado. Our mission, as you see here, is to create parks and protect land for people to ensure healthy, livable communities for generations to come. And a lot of times when I talk about that mission statement, I focus in on two words, and those are for people. People are at the heart and the center of everything we do, as are their communities. We are about finding creative ways in partnership with local communities to enhance connections to the outdoors. We work all across the country. We're a national organization. We have been doing our thing for about 47 years around the country and for about 37 or so here in Colorado. And our office, since its inception in Colorado, has always been in Denver. And to give you a sense of kind of the scale through a few numbers of some of our work, I thought I would just share this. But I wanted to talk about two of these numbers here. The first one is that lower left number, $80 billion of public funds generated. I bring that up because I know you all were supporters of Measure 2A in 2018, which was the PARC's ballot measure, which was a quarter-cent sales tax increase for parks, rivers, trails, and trees, generating somewhere between 30 to 40 million a year, depending on the economy, for Denver's parks and recreation needs. We do that kind of work all across the state. We've helped raise about $1.2, $1.5 billion in public funds through county ballot measures, statewide work, and measures like the one in Denver. The other figure I want to point to is that 9 million people figure at the bottom right. As an organization, we have a vision that everyone in our country would live within a 10-minute walk of a quality park or other outdoor experience. Here in Colorado, we know about 1 million people don't have that access, and we're working very hard to change that in Denver, across the metro region, and across the state. Well, we know that we've made good progress in a lot of places, as some of those numbers will attest. We know we also have a long way to go. And we know that fewer people than ever, broadly speaking, are getting outdoors. We've seen some changes in the numbers of people utilizing the outdoors for exercise and mental and physical health benefits because of the pandemic, and options are fewer. So we're hoping that that trend will continue to strengthen as we move away from the pandemic era. But the reality is that 118 million people across the country are not meeting daily physical requirements, and that has a significant financial and human toll on all of us. As I mentioned, about 100 million people currently in the country don't have access to a close-to-home park, and that includes 28 million kids. So this is a real health crisis, and it affects all of us, including our youngest people. We also know that even thinking before the COVID-19 era, we know that people are stressed. The always-on digital culture is creating all kinds of connection problems for people. People aren't as connected as they should be to their communities and to one another. And we know that the rising generation is more concerned than ever about issues like climate change, which we'll talk about today with respect to the heat data that Linda will be discussing. And a lot of concerns about the widening gaps between the haves and the have-nots. We know that there's a significant discrepancy in access to cooling shade as well as parks. And we know that unfortunately, your zip code can still be a better predictor of your health than is your genetic code. And that's something that we aim to change, because we know that parks and trails and open spaces are part of that solution long-term. There is solid reason for hope, because we know the scale of the problem and we have tools and things that we can do to change that. And one of those is utilizing big data to help us understand where we can work. Linda and her team are developing a lot of new insights through data and analysis that we use with decision makers to help inform master planning, to help inform new laws, ballot measures, and other things. We are using, creating an annual ranking of cities and how they're doing in terms of parks and park access, which Linda will talk about. And thanks to Linda and her team, we can actually measure down to the neighborhood block level what kind of access people have to parks, and are we moving the needle on improving health outcomes, addressing heat-related deaths in disadvantaged communities. So Linda and her team are making a big difference in this work. But we also know that data can't solve all of the problems. We, as an organization, and here in Colorado and Denver, invest heavily in working with local communities. We want to understand local context so that we can ensure that the parks that we help deliver reflect local cultures, local desires and visions, and the heritage of these local neighborhoods. We feel that we're pretty relentless in understanding the needs and challenges of local communities. And our focus is, after that community engagement, is on really delivering tangible, lasting results on the ground. That's what we're known for. We work all across the country in that regard, focusing on delivering results, specifically looking to deliver outcomes in these three areas: climate outcomes, health improvement outcomes, and ensuring equitable access to the outdoors for all. And we do that through four primary strategies. We do land protection work so that we can create new spaces for parks and open space. We then help work with communities to design, envision, and do master planning and park construction for new parks. We design trails and help protect land for trail corridors so we get people out of their vehicles to reduce carbon emissions and get people moving to address those physical health issues that we talked about. And we're also doing a lot of work around schoolyards to turn these spaces that are often underutilized after hours in local communities into vibrant spaces that can be used by local communities to help address the 10-minute walk to a park gap, but also create very engaging and active learning spaces for kids during the day. As I mentioned, we've been working in Colorado for about 37 years. We have a long history and a tremendously large body of work, ranging from a significant amount of work in the Metro Denver region to the southwest corner of the state and everything in between. Again, with that common connection of trying to connect people in their communities to the outdoors. Looking just here at the Denver metro area, please don't try to read all these little dots. I just want to give you a sense of the scope of our work. We've done everything from significant additions from land protection standpoint to state parks like Golden Gate Canyon State Park or Roxborough State Park, to small, very impactful urban parks like New Freedom Park on the east side of Denver, where we helped just take a vacant lot and transform that into a true community asset. In the Montbello neighborhood, for example, we acquired a 5-acre site that's now Montbello Open Space Park. Still has a fence around it, but we're hoping that that will come down in early fall, so that can be open to the community as a new trailhead to outdoor experiences in that neighborhood. And we've been very active in the Westwood neighborhood, using all of our strategies, including acquiring land for Cuatro Vientos Park, which was that neighborhood's first new park in 30 years, to creating a master plan and helping revitalize Westwood Park with art and community gathering spaces and new playgrounds and a walking loop with outdoor fitness equipment and so on. So we're really focused on improving Denver's access to parks, but also making sure that the parks that we have are the highest quality possible, which is where Measure 2A for Parks came in back in 2018, and our work in places like Westwood Park and revitalizing that existing space is all about. So that was a 6 or 7 or 8 minute dissertation on the Trust for Public Land and our work in Colorado. Happy to answer questions here, or we can wait until the end when Linda dives in, but I leave that to you, Cindy, and how you want to handle that.
Well, what I would suggest that I can speak to the reports, and then we
Sure.
should have enough time to take questions for both Jim and I when I'm finished. I also just have a handful of slides. So let's see. So thanks, Cindy, again for inviting us to talk about this. We are really excited. We were really excited to have released this information in this report, and just thrilled for the opportunity to share our findings with you all. So as Jim mentioned, I'm part of the research and innovation team at the Trust for Public Land. We are sort of the data backbone for the organization. So we're a team of geospatial analysts and data analytics professionals. We have a data scientist on our team. We have a couple of planners as well as conservation economists. And what we do is help ensure our 25 or so field teams from across the United States, including Jim's team based there in Denver. We just help them do their work more efficiently, more strategically. We also work directly with a lot of the community partners that our teams work with to also provide them with the data that we have regular access to when we're trying to make our decisions and, you know, build and improve parks and transform schoolyards and protect land as well. So you can go to the next slide, Jim. So Jim mentioned one of the premier products that we release is something called the PARC score. It is the annual ranking of the 100 largest cities and their park systems. And what we do is we analyze how well those park systems are meeting the needs of their local residents. And so this year, Minneapolis was at the top of the PARC score ranking, and all of the data that sits behind that is publicly available. It's a lot of information, but it's a really good snapshot for how park systems are doing. And we know as we put all that information together, and as we're talking to the park systems directly, a lot of them are always looking for different ways to get creative and meet the needs of the populations that they serve. The next slide, Jim. So Jim also referenced, well, I guess just to give you a little bit of context for how we were, how we released the report and where we were. We work really closely with our climate team. Our climate team at the Trust for Public Land has a program that they call Climate Smart Cities. And this is an effort just to always ensure that every park we build is climate smart. So it's taking advantage of green infrastructure and different ways that green infrastructure and parks can help to keep cities cool, can connect neighbors to each other, can act as mobility, you know, different mobility other than just cars all the time and personal automobiles, where parks and open space can help absorb rainwater, stormwater, and flood, and also act as protection, protective barriers to rainstorms, or even, you know, as Jim mentioned, where we can be acquiring land for parks and open space. So we work very hands-on with our city partners and then a whole technical team to help us to really have them articulate their priorities to us. And so we built a tool for Denver. This is just one example. We've built these specific decision support tools for about 14 cities or so. And what we started to notice was in each of these cities, we were including data related to urban heat. And so this is just a quick snapshot of what that looks like for Denver. And then we also included heat for a tool that we built for the city of Dallas. Same thing for the city of Cleveland and for Chattanooga as well. And we thought, you know, every time we include this data, we are recreating this wheel every single time. And we're also hearing from more and more cities that this information is really important and it's really hard to get to. And so we realized, you know, we could offer a lot here to the space if we can create or provide every city with urban heat island data. So if you go to the next slide, Jim, we have, as Jim mentioned, we know where every park is for 14,000 cities and towns. So we offer a tool called PARC Serve, and you can type in any city here and it will show you the areas of park need in your city. And on the next slide, what you'll see is we then released, we created an urban heat island data set for all of those 14,000 cities and towns. And so now when you go to PARC Serve, in addition to seeing where your areas of park need are located, you have the option here to turn on and be able to visualize a data layer showing you all your urban heat islands. And then you can then see where those top 5 areas are. So it's a really nice way for city planners, decision makers, community organizations like yourselves to quickly see where areas of park need also overlap with areas of extreme heat. And we've just, you know, in all of the conversations that we have with cities, we know that only a handful of cities have this really good high resolution information to help them understand the different ways that parks could help to address urban heat. So that's kind of where we got started. So if you can go to the next slide, Jim. So we developed this urban heat island data set for the entire country, and it gives us a really unique bird's eye view, if you will, for the role that parks can play. So we released this report after doing a little bit more analysis with our heat data. So the PARC-Serve database covers, parks for all 14,000 cities and towns, and we just overlaid that with PARC data to give us a sense for, well, to what extent, where are people experiencing heat, and what's the role that parks can play to help address that. As we were doing that, we also wanted to understand better just park quality. Jim mentioned our 10-minute walk metric. We want to put every single person in this country within a 10-minute walk of a quality park. And so for us internally at the Trust for Public Land, we think a lot about what draws people to parks. What is it about the park that has them there? And perhaps just as importantly, for people who do live within a 10-minute walk of a park, why are they not going to that park? So we did a deeper dive into our 14,000 cities and towns because we really wanted to at least take a look at park size, the population density surrounding each park, the racial makeup of people within that 10-minute walk shed around a park, and also the household income. So just give us more demographics of people who live around each park. So the next slide, this is one of our major findings. And it was just eye-opening for us to finally get our hands on good data. And what we did was we looked at parks that serve primarily white neighborhoods versus parks in non-white neighborhoods. And we found, and this is our finding, that in fact parks in majority non-white neighborhoods are half as large and they serve 5 times more people. The next slide basically does a similar analysis looking at acreage, population density, race, and income. And we were looking at parks that serve low income versus high income households. And you can see the finding here. And so I think this really popped out for us given the sort of pandemic and COVID times that we're all in. We had released a series of reports earlier in May this year, along with our annual Park Score ranking. It was a series of small reports called Parks in the Pandemic. And it was just one of the things that we were looking closely at was actual park usage numbers. So we contacted a handful of park agencies that we know use some type of counting device, whether it's a device that sits over a trailhead post where as soon as you pass the trail, it counts you. Other park systems use vehicle counters as well. And it confirmed, I think, of a lot of what we all personally have been experiencing during this pandemic, which is that many people were rushing out to their parks in droves to just find a little bit of respite from what's been going on since this spring. And so that knowledge of more and more people using their parks, especially in this pandemic, coupled with this data around how parks in majority non-white communities and parks in majority low-income communities, that those parks serve that many more people, it just means that potentially, your space where you're trying to keep a safe physical distance from other people around you, it's just that much harder to do because your park is potentially much more crowded. So, for us at the Trust for Public Land, we are really driving at the role of parks as critical public health infrastructure. And so this finding really stood out for us, which is why we're just very eager to share it with as many people as we can. So you go to the next slide. The other finding in the report is about heat. I think I live in the Bay Area of California. Not only are we going through some pretty awful wildfires right now, but we just recently experienced our second heat wave this year, which is very, very unusual for the Bay Area. Especially, I live in Oakland, California, where it's fairly temperate weather, but we had many days over 100 degrees, which is very, very unusual for us. And so and we know now also that this year may be another record-breaking year in terms of number of days of extreme heat. So as we look back over time, even in the last 5 years, we're seeing that every year we are breaking records for extreme heat here in the United States. And that's a significant health issue because heat is the #1 weather-related killer of people here in this country. So when we do our 10-minute walk analysis for heat, what we do here, the image that you see here shaded in this sort of yellow, lighter yellow-green color, that's the 10-minute walk shed. That is the dark green patch in the middle is actually Mestizo Curtis Park out there in Denver. And so the shaded area around it is that 10-minute walk shed. So for us at the Trust for Public Land, we focus quite a bit on things that happen inside that 10-minute walk area and areas outside of that 10-minute walk area. So what we've done is an analysis for the country, basically for all 14,000 cities and towns, to look at those areas inside a 10-minute walk and those areas outside of a 10-minute walk. And for Denver, this is actually what we discovered. If you go to the next slide. We know that parks can play a significant role in addressing extreme heat. And what we found in Denver, again, when we're comparing that 10-minute walk area directly around a park versus the areas outside of that 10-minute walk shed, you can see the heat differential between those two areas. It's quite significant. And we know that for, this is, again, is just, these are extreme temperatures. I think what probably happened here is that we're, in Denver, there is a wide range of park sizes, and there's also a wide range of parks with different degrees of tree canopy cover and different degrees of vegetation. And so for parks that offer a significant cooling effect, it is largely due to what we think of as deep green canopy cover. So really extensive coverage of thick green trees, and then good vegetation on the ground as well. And that combination of canopy cover and vegetation is what allows parks to offer that cooling benefit for people. All right, so next slide, Jim. I know that I've talked about this report for a lot of folks, for a lot of different organizations similar to yours, and what often comes up are people are thinking about, especially when they think about park equity and the challenges related to park size and population density and race and income. The next question is always, well, what can we do about it in our community? And I think the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board is a really great example of what one community is trying to do to address this park equity challenge. It's interesting, they have been at the top of our annual park score ranking pretty regularly. I think over the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years, Minneapolis and St. Paul are always in the top 3. And yet they said it's not enough. I think that they really appreciate how we're thinking about their park system, but they also recognize that they can do more to address park inequity in their system. So what they're doing now, you can see on the right-hand side, they actually released a report. Actually, well, that's fine here. What they're doing is they're looking at 2 things primarily to help them distribute funding, capital improvement fundings for parks and trails. They're looking at park characteristics and community characteristics. So if you go to the next slide, so this font is very, very small. And so what I've done is actually pulled out all of the text that you see in that kind of dark, that more red purple. So park characteristics looks at, historic investment in parks, ADA compatibility, looks at some of the quality of the trails and also the natural resources there. But what really stands out here is what they think about related to community characteristics. And what is new for Minneapolis is now really trying to understand where parks are as it relates to racially concentrated areas of poverty. They're also thinking about park access from a 10-minute walk perspective, and they're thinking about neighborhood safety. And so those measures collectively, along with then the park characteristics, help them determine funding for their parks and trail projects. So it's a really nice, sophisticated way that one park system is trying to address equity. And we really appreciate it. You know, as I said, we know where all the parks are, and we want more people to have access to parks. But I think all of us know that not all parks are the same. I know in my neighborhood, I gravitate to the parks that are a little bit bigger and that have a lot more tree canopy, just because it's a nice, cool place to be. So this is just one example of what one city is trying to do. You know, we rank it at the very top of our park ranking, and I appreciate so much that they said there's so much more that we can do. So this is relatively new for them as a park system, but it is now encoded in their capital project scheduling approach. And that, I believe, is my last slide. Right.